All right, let's take a look at the next project that we're going to create. Let's assume our client is looking for a prototype for a game that they can put on the web or whatever that teaches about how helicopters drop food off to underrepresented areas. So it'd be kind of cool if we start off with a way that we can start our helicopter. So what I did is I have it scripted so when you hit the space bar, you can see our helicopter takes off. W and S moves our plane forward. If I hold D, it goes to the right. If I press A, it can go this way. And the goal of this particular game is really just to drop food off on these locations here. And I generally expand on it. But after you drop it off at 3 locations, you win the game. Now you can obviously expand on this and duplicate it. And from things you learned, you can have pirates that sort of stop you. But you can see as you continue to drop these off to as a memory saver, what we'll do also is we'll add to this. We'll have these destroy and not just stay in our scene. So it should be a fun project to build on the last 3 or 4 that we created. And so let's jump into our next video where we'll start off by creating this terrain environment. All right, let's start off like we always do by creating a new game. So I'm going to go here and click on New Project. And we're just going to go with we'll select all templates here. We're going to go with 3D Core. And the name of my project is just, I named the other one Helicopter Game, my proof of concept before I built this one. So we can just name this Food Drop. More along the lines of the action of the game. We could separate this out. We don't necessarily have to camel case it. And I'm going to go ahead and hit Create Project. But I'm going to pause the video because this could take a little bit of time. And really, you don't just have to see Unity's splash screen and the setup process. All right, here we are. So let's go up to the top right corner here and change it from default to 2x3. And I generally just grab my project tab and I dock it below this. And what I'm going to do is select these 3 little dots and just make a 1-column layout list here. And that way I can easily access my assets. Now what I need to do is create like a nice little terrain that our helicopter can fly through. And what's nice about Unity is it has a nice feature. So if I go up to here to Window and I go to Package Manager, if we check our packages, we don't really have any in our project, but we want to do Unity Registry here. And you can see we get a bunch. And down at the bottom, you can see there are terrain tools. I want to go ahead and install these terrain tools. And these are a little bit more advanced tools. And you can see here it says it allows us to sculpt and paint and all this other good stuff. Now another thing is once you've installed it, you can see down at the bottom right corner it says remove here. If you'd like to remove it. One thing I'd like to do is download asset samples from the asset store. This is where you're going to get your textures and additional brushes. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and that's going to open my web browser and take me to the Unity Asset Store. All right, so here we are. It took me to the Unity Asset Store. Now you can see in the corner here, I'm already signed in. You're probably going to be prompted when you click this Open in Unity button or Download, depending. But you can see here, they give you a bunch of different brushes and a few of these textures. You can make your own textures. It's outside of the scope of this class, but we are going to have an environment modeling class where we learn how to make our own textures. So go ahead and open in Unity. So for me, because I've done this before, it already has it where I can download it. Go ahead and hit download and then click import to import it into your project. And that's this button in the right hand corner here. So I got this warning saying this Unity package has package manager dependencies, install upgrade. I'm going to go ahead and click install upgrade. It won't hurt your project. All right, now you can see that it's asking me if I want to import all of these, and I'm completely okay with that. Just so I can see it a little bit better, I'm going to close my package manager. We're going to need it again in a future video, but for now, all we need are these assets. Like you can see trees and grass and ferns. So let's go ahead and hit import. All right, I know it imported everything in successfully because it shows a terrain sample assets folder here. Let's go up to the top here and go to the find your game object in the top toolbar. And then go down to 3D object, and what we can do is click on terrain. This will create the terrain mesh. It looks like a plane, but it gives you the opportunity to sculpt it, and so it gives you a lot more properties than a regular plain 3D object. So let's go ahead and click on that. Now you can see here that it's asking me to prompt me to rename it. It's fine. The name terrain is okay. I'm going to go ahead and select it, and I'm going to press the F like Frank key in my scene just to look at the sheer scale of this. You can see I have my pivot here in the center. Now off to the side here, you can see there's terrain and there's all these tools. If I click this first option here, it says create neighbor terrains. This would allow me to create additional terrains to the left or right of this object. You can see here there's a grid. For now, our game is pretty small, but as you decide to expand your helicopter game in scope, you can feel free to add more terrains. The next one is what I'm interested in, which is paint terrain. Now, you can also change these different options right here. So for example, say we want to sculpt, and it says bridge, clone, noise, terrace. There's all these different effects. If you click here, there's painting trees, right? So right now I don't have any trees, but if I hit, for instance, edit trees, I can add a tree. Now, you have to kind of go into the game object, and some of this stuff is not fully textured, and I think it's taking a second to load. So you're going to have to do a little bit of fixing to connect the textures to these, but they're in there. It's out of the scope of this tutorial, and like I said, we're going to have an environment modeling class later, so don't worry too much about those. For now, we'll probably be sculpting our own trees. And then let's take a look at this last one. This is paint details. This is pretty cool. You can actually go in here and start painting out textures. We will go into that. And let's see our last option here. This is settings of the overall terrain. We're just looking to do some basic, just going over this, build a basic terrain so we can just sort of essentially get a prototype going of our game. So right now I'm in paint texture, and let's see. Let's go ahead and start with sculpt, and there's some pretty good stuff. Bridge here, we'll create a bridge between 2 points, and we'll just start with raise and lower terrain. There are videos online that cover most of this stuff. It's again out of the scope of this video. So let's go ahead and select raise and lower terrain. And you can see here it says hold control or click to decrease the height. So if I click in here, you can see that my brush is pretty tiny. So I can go into brush size here, expand it. And if I hold control, I can create a little indentation. I don't know, it was pretty small so you couldn't see it. But let's go ahead and just down the sides here, let's create like a little cavernous area. And our helicopter is going to be sort of in the center there. So something like this. And let's paint the ground plane. And what I meant by the control thing is that say I want to create a little area in here, and then maybe I'll put a platform here or something. So it just guides our player to that specific area. We can also increase our brush a little bit bigger. And if you'd like, you can maybe put a star there or something, and then put your platform in there. So it's got some cool options. Let's switch over to paint textures, which is down here. Now, in order to create different texture sections, you have to add a layer. So I'm going to add a layer here, and say I want my base across this bottom to be sort of this rock area. So I'm going to go ahead and double click that, and you can see it automatically added this rock texture down at the bottom here. Now what we can do is we can say, well, rock is cool, but maybe the main area in the section, and let's select a different brush, is supposed to be grass. So let's select this kind of dirty grass here, and I'm going to increase my brush size now, or brush strength. Now brush strength deals with how the opacity essentially of the texture. So if I go in here and I left click, you can see I'm painting in some grass, and as I click I can paint in a little bit more. But if I take my brush strength all the way up, you can see there's a difference, though subtle, between this green and that rock area. So let's say I take my brush strength pretty low here, and I just want to fade out that edge. You see how that's a little, I can see more of the rock peeking through, and that's what I meant by the fading part of it. And let's click add layer, and maybe we'll add I don't know, some snow-capped mountains on the top here. So I don't know if that's the best option, because it's the concrete is already white. So, but let's see. Yeah, there we go. It seems to work okay. So we got a little bit of snow at the top of some of these peaks. So just really basic kind of covering this tool. So I'm going to go ahead and save this as level 1. So in our scenes folder here, I'm going to go level. underscore 01 and just save this out. And again, feel free to explore this further on your own, or wait for the environment modeling video that we're going to have later. So in the next video or section, if I think I might make this one long tutorial, what we're going to do is we're actually going to go ahead and start modeling out our helicopter. Okay, so now that we have a terrain in place here, let's install ProBuilder, which is the modeling tool that we're going to use to model our helicopter. All right, for that we got to go back up to Window at the top and go down to Package Manager here. And I'm going to be scrolling, and you can see packages in my assets. We want to go to Unity Registry here, and we're going to select ProBuilder. And then we're just going to go ahead and hit install here. All right, we know that ProBuilder has installed correctly because it's asking me to remove it. Also, let's go ahead and close this. All right, and at the top we have a new section called Tools, and if I click on that, you can see ProBuilder and ProBuilder window. Generally, what I do though is here's ProBuilder window. I'm going to select that, and in order to set the size, is I go to New Shape here. And I'm going to just select the regular sphere, and I'm going to expand the sphere properties, make sure it's on 111. Then I'm going to hold, let's see, Control, and I'm going to left click, and let's see, let's try that one more time. There we go. I hold Shift actually, and I left click, and then I'm going to hit F to focus, and that gives me a general idea of a the properly scaled 1 meter by 1 meter sphere. Otherwise, you can go in here and just based on your setting and how far you're looking, you can drag out a pretty big sphere, and then that becomes way too large, and you have to set your code based on scale. So I'm going to go ahead and hit F to focus on this, and this is going to be essentially the body of where the people would sit inside of it. And I'm going to hit R, scale this out a little bit like this. And then let's create maybe the little key area that comes out of the body, and then like a rudder area. So let's go ahead and hit New Shape here, and I'm going to select Cube and just create something out like this, a little bit higher. Press W, push this inside of here. Now what's pretty cool is, and actually on my other example, I didn't even have this. Let's make some landing gear. So off to the side here, I'm just going to drag out a little box that represents one part of the landing gear. I'm just holding left here, moving my mouse up. So you can see here, create a little cube. And then you could always like go to object mode here, press W and delete these if you don't want them. And then let's go ahead and select, just make 2 more boxes on top here. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then just drag this up. So let me it's sort of hard to see, but what you can do is when you have the shape there, and if you watched my space video, you've seen this before, but you can actually drag and draw right on top of the surface. You see that? So I'm going to hit R, scale that in a little bit, hit W for move, and then hit Control D and just copy this over. Now I'm going to group these together. So I selected all 3 here, and then I just look for Merge Objects. And then I'm just going to move this up and just kind of place it. Now it looks kind of tiny, so I'm going to hit R, and I'm just going to scale this up a little bit. Again, if you're an artist, you can probably build this a little bit better in a digital content creation tool. But for now, this is fine. I'm going to go ahead and select my maybe my vertex tool here, and I'm going to make sure, because if I highlight this and I select it, you could see it got both sides. And the reason for that is inside of here, you can see we have a variety of different options. And what we're looking for is select hidden faces. Like if you have that on, what happens is if I go to highlight this, it'll let you select all the way through. But if you have it off, here's a better example. If I select this, you can see I can't select all the way through. But with select faces turned on, now if I highlight this and I select, you can see I can get all the way through. It goes all the other side. So you want to kind of just make sure that's always on. And then you can just play with the width of these, how you like them, and grab both of these and just pull them up inside. And let's go back to object mode and make sure my pivot is centered. And then let's hit Control D and just duplicate this over. So there's our landing gear. We can move this down just a little bit, move that forward. And let's put a little cube on the top here, maybe even a cylinder. And this is where our propeller will sit. But our propeller is going to be a separate object because we're going to use code to rotate it. So I'm going to hold shift and I'm in object mode here, and I'm going to select all of these different pieces, and I'm just going to go ahead and hit merge objects. Now when I select it, it's all one object merged together. And again, I want to center pivot on this, and it looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and create our propeller. Well, let's paint this. So I'm going to go to vertex color here. I'm going to paint the whole thing a light blue, and then maybe my landing gear will be a light gray. So when I highlight it like that and I hit apply, you can see it'll actually color specific areas. So let's say we wanted to put some sort of like a racing stripe, a yellow stripe down the side. Well, I can go in here and with an edge selected, something like this, I can go in there and I can insert an edge loop. And now you can see there's a cut. And if I select this, I can insert another edge loop like that. And if I go to face mode, I can select all of these and then go back to vertex coloring here, and I can just add our yellow stripe. Then you can adjust the size of that stripe, something like this. And if you want, you can play with, again, you can design it however you like, you know, hit R and scale this in a little bit. You can get pretty crazy with it. All right, so let's go ahead and create the propeller. So I'm going to actually select the cube, and I'm going to drag it out something like this. Actually, we want to give ourselves a little bit more room and give ourselves some height. And this takes some getting used to creating. So I'm going to hit R. I want to center pivot. And I'm just going to line this up here. And that might be too big. So you can hit R and just sort of scale this in, bring this into, and like this. And then I'm going to hit Control D. And then on the y-axis, I'm going to rotate this one that I just duplicated. So I hit Control D like duck. Another way of doing it is you can go up here to edit, and then there's duplicate here, and that'll duplicate it. Now what I want to do with this is I'm going to select both of these, make sure that's in the center, and I'm going to merge objects. And there's our propeller. Now this, we've already merged it, but if I double click this, or let's actually select this middle and just sort of move it more towards the center. Same thing with this. Grab that top here. Straighten that out. Looks like one of these verts got moved. I didn't grab it. And that looks a little bit more centered. Let's move this to the center here. All right, now let's name this copter. Let's name this prop for propeller. And what I'm going to do is wherever this copter goes, I want this propeller to follow. So I'm going to grab prop and I'm going to drop it on top of the copter. And you can see here that the propeller, oh, you know what? I named those wrong. Here's the propeller. So it's prop, and then let's name this copter. And then I'm going to drag the propeller, there we go, on top of the copter. And same thing, maybe we'll make this, I don't know, yellow. So it stands out on the environment. And I mean, we could definitely give this thing, I don't know, some windows or something. So if you click on this side here, you can see it gives us a little bit more of a flattened view. And I can go in here and select these faces. And then, you know, even though it's not perfect, again, proof of concept, we can maybe make this a little lighter, and those are our windows. All right, I'm going to go ahead and hit Control S to save this. And what we can do too is we can start to create our prefabs folder. And this is really good too, because when you have prefabs, remember, you're taking things in the scene and you're saving sort of combined copies of them, right? So here's our copter prefab. And if I select this and I go to object mode, you can see there's our copter. So we could have multiple copters. So in the next video, we'll take a look at scripting our copter movement. All right, if you recall in the last video, we went ahead and scripted this, or modeled rather, this helicopter. In this video, we're going to go ahead and script its movement. So down in the Assets folder, let's right-click, go to Create, and then go to Folder. And then I'm going to name this folder underscore scripts. And the reason behind this is I just want to keep it to the underscore allows us to keep the folder at the top. All right, so then I'm going to right-click, create a C# script in here, and I'm just going to call this helicopter controller. Let's double-click it and start building out some of the movement of our helicopter. Now, to save time, what I'm going to do is pause the video periodically and just kind of type out the code. And let's start with something that we should be comfortable at this point because we've done it 2 or 3 times. Let's script our helicopter's movement using the WASD keys. And we'll do that generally in the update function, but we'll also create some variables up top to control the speed and stuff. Now I'm going to be using something that's a little different than the word public. It's called serialized field. Let's take a look at that. So actually a couple things. Before we do that, on the copter model, I want to make sure that I'm adding a rigid body. And then I'm going to add this helicopter script. So this is before we switch over. So I'm going to drag this helicopter script on here. Now I had already started coding it when I realized as I was scripting it out that I'm going to need this rigid body component. And so for now, go ahead and click on Add Component and then add your rigid body here. And then, as if you recall from before, drag this helicopter script that we just created onto the copter here. And let's go ahead and I'm going to save this, but let's, and also make sure that you go to Overrides, Apply All, so that we're applying the script and the rigid body to this. And yeah, so now let's return back to Visual Studio and let's go through that code that I control some of the movement line by line. All right, so I don't want you to feel overwhelmed, so we're going to go line by line, and this is all stuff you've seen before. So line in 7 and 8 are just variables. So if you need to, pause the video and start typing this out. But this is just the move speed that we're going to use, and that'll allow the game designer or ourselves to tweak or fine-tune the movement mechanics. Serialized field looks a little different than what we're used to. What you want to do is if you'd like to keep these variables private and protected, you could add this serialized field in front of this within these brackets, and it'll allow it to be variable to be public, but it's private within the code, so it's protected. So this is just a different way of doing this. We made another variable down here that is a rigid body that we're going to use to reference our helicopter rigid body or get that component like before. Now down in the update function here, we have float horizontal. Now this horizontal is storing the axis, the horizontal axis. And we have float vertical, which is storing the vertical movement. So now if you recall from previous tutorials, this is storing if we press WASD. It's not really doing anything, but it's storing a -1 to 1 value. Down here in move direction, this is where we're creating a vector3 variable. So this is just storing whenever we press vertical here. Now actually, to be honest with you, we don't even necessarily need this horizontal. I think I added it because I was going to show you an alternate way of doing things, but I think just for as we step through this tutorial, really all we need is this vertical. So as we're pressing A and D, S rather for vertical, that's the W and S key, we're going to store that variable inside of the Z axis here. And then there's a minus here because we want to invert that press based on the direction of our helicopter. And then we want to multiply that by the move speed up here so we can control how fast our helicopter moves back and forth. So let me save this just to show you how this works up to this point. And again, I know we've done this before, but it's kind of nice to have a refresher. All right, so here we are back in Unity. If I press, I'm clicking down here to select. If I press W, it moves forward. You can see S, it moves back. Now, what I'm going to show you next is I'm holding A here to move left and then D here to move right. And what this is doing is it's controlling, sort of rotating it. So let's go back to Visual Studio and take a look at the simplicity of that code. All right, so below this move speed here, we have move direction, and this is what's actually applying that direction to, it says transform.rotation move direction. So this is actually kind of locking in our movement here. And if we go a little bit lower, this is what's actually moving it. We're storing all of those values from here and here and to move direction. And we're applying it as velocity to that rigid body. So that's what's adding a little bit of force to move it. Now, this is a little different, and I just wanted to add it in there to show you an alternate way of rotating versus the other tutorials, which we had before, where we were adding force. And we could actually use the actual rotation of the object to apply a number. So as I'm holding A down, we actually are using the transform.rotate y-axis, and we just apply that speed every time we press A. So this is just another way of rotating an object. So this is without using physics. So actually we can just put this rotating the helicopter without physics. So I just wanted to show you another way of doing this. And again, it takes repetition and practice. So if it's still like confusing, like why would you use this versus the other one? Sometimes you won't use physics on an object and you might need an alternate way. And I hadn't shown you this way before. So here we could really just press A and D and rotate our object. Now there's something else that would be cooler. And what that is I'd like it to take off in the air. And I'd like that rotated propeller to rotate. So let's save this. And at the top, I'm going to add a few more variables here. And they're going to be references to game objects and the propeller object that's attached to the plane. And we're going to control the speed. So let's, and I'm going to pause the video and just paste in a few of those variables. All right, so here you can see we have a propeller speed, which is set to 50. So I'm going to save that off. And then we have a private transform propeller object. So I'm going to save this and return to Unity and show you how this works. All right, so here we are back in Unity. Now, we made that public variable. We have the speed, and we're going to use this propeller speed to control how fast this rotates on the y-axis. And I want to grab a reference to the transform of this propeller. So let me show you what that is. So I'm going to drag this and drop in here and see how it says none transform. This is this transform component. So what I could say is I can say transform.rotate y at a certain amount, and it'll rotate it just like we were doing with the movement of, or the rotation of our helicopter. So let's save this, and let's just make sure that we are always applying this when we need to lock in these values and to lock in that this is in there. And let's return to Unity and take a look at this. And instead of Unity, I meant Visual Studio. So down here at the bottom, let's just at the very top, let's see, maybe we'll do this after, let's see. You know what, we'll just drop this at the top here just to take a look at how this looks. And I'll go ahead and delete line 35 since we're not going to need it. Clean up our code a little bit. And let's look at the code to make that propeller. All right, so here we have propeller. As you recall up at the top here, we have transform propeller. And down here, we're just saying, hey, we're going to access that rotation of that propeller on the y-axis, and we're going to do it according to that 50 value here. So let's save this and return to Unity and take a look at how that works. All right, so I went ahead and pressed play, and you can see now that our propeller is spinning. Now, that's kind of cool and everything, but I think it would be much better if we had it where if we press the space bar on our key, on our keyboard, and we moved our helicopter around, it went into the air, and the propeller would start, and once that propeller starts, like we hit spacebar to sort of start our engine, the propeller turns, and then the helicopter goes in the air based on a specific altitude. So I'm going to save this. Let's return to Visual Studio, and let's script that out. All right, so what I'd like to do is create a Boolean variable and just called started. And what this variable will do is check whether our engine has started or not. And the way we're going to start our engine is by pressing spacebar. All right, so just to clarify, a Boolean variable could be 0, 1, or true and false. Really, they mean the same thing. I like to use the true and false keyword because what I'm saying here is, and really you could, engine started, something like that. And so I'm going to hit Control S to save that. So right now it's set to false. Our engine is not started. And what we could do here is we can say if, and then I'm going to hit tab twice, and then I'm just going to grab engine started and paste it in here. Now what this does is, this is the same way as saying if engine started is the same as true. That's the same way if just shorthand is just writing engine started. So it's saying if this value is set to true, which we haven't set it to true yet, we're going to actually grab all of these I'm going to hit Control. I believe this is the end of that. Oh, that's the update slash. Okay, so from line 31, I'm just clicking on that. And I'm going to hold Shift and click all the way on line 58. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit so you can see that. So I'm grabbing all of the guts. Oops, sorry, I'm sorry, 36 to 58. I'm grabbing all of those guts, and I'm going to hit Control X. And I'm going to paste it in here. I'm going to hit Control S. Now, I shouldn't be able to, at this point, I shouldn't be able to, we'll zoom in a little bit here so you can see that. You shouldn't see any movement. I shouldn't be able to hit the WASD key, and you shouldn't see this propeller move. So let me go ahead and save that, and then we'll return to Unity and see if this works. All right, here we are back in Unity. I'm going to go ahead and press play. And now I'm clicking in this view. And notice the propeller isn't moving. I can't move this with the WASD keys. So let's go ahead and start the engine of this object. So let's go back to Visual Studio. All right, now I might put this move stuff outside of here, but let's for now just see how this works, if I'm doing this correctly. So if I input, oh, we want to do engine started. I typed out started. Okay, so if I press the spacebar key, it's going to turn on my engine. It's going to set it to true and rotate my propeller, and it should give me the ability to move it around. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Control S to save this. Go ahead and pause the video and type this out. All right, we're back here in Unity. I'm going to click in my game view so that I can access my controls. So I'm going to hit spacebar. Notice when I hit spacebar, now my engine moves and my helicopter is rotating around. Well, that's really cool, but it would be nice if my helicopter was in the air. Now, there's a couple things I need to consider. One, I can add some force and send this up into the air, but it won't stop. It'll keep going. So I want to create a variable that maybe sets maximum altitude to whatever this y value is. And so right now, this helicopter's center pivot is set to 5. So let's say it goes up to 15 or something. And that will like kind of close off our movement, but we'll make that variable also public so that we can, or put it in a serialized field so that we can access or tweak that. So let's go ahead and jump into Visual Studio and script that out. So let's just go underneath this engine started here and paste these two variables in here. Now, lift force is the upward force applied to the helicopter. Remember, we're dealing with physics here. So I just named it lift force. So when I hit the space bar, it's going to start my rotator and it's going to apply 10 force. I don't know if that's too little or too high because it's based on the size of the objects in my scene and how much they weigh. And then there's max altitude. 50 is a little crazy. We had it set to 5. So I think I'm just going to save that off as 15. And we'll keep it low for now. And then, let's see, let's go down here a little bit. And where should we put this? Well, we definitely need to put it inside of our engine started. And maybe we'll put it at the end. We'll put the if statement maybe after our propeller rotation. And that might be cool. So let's go ahead and I'll zoom in a little bit. And we're going to put an if statement in here that's going to check our maximum altitude by the Y position of our character, or our helicopter rather. All right, so I'm going to paste this here, and I'm going to save this. Now, if you recall, it says check if the helicopter. Now, this is the transform of whatever this script is attached to, which is our helicopter. So what we're saying here is if the helicopter's position here is less than 15, continually apply force. Well, how much force are we applying to the Y-axis? Vector 3 diet up is a shorthand way of writing, you know how we do vector 3 and then we have 0 and then a number for y and then 0. This is a shorthand way of doing it. And this is, if we highlight over this, you can see the second thing, it says force mode. Now acceleration is pretty cool because it doesn't look at the mass of our object, like how much it weighs, and it just sends it up. And actually I like this because it gives it a nice little smooth lift off. So it looks kind of like a helicopter to me. So let me save this. And I think that should be correct. And let's jump back in and see if we have any issues. All right, let's go ahead and press play here. And I'm going to go ahead and hit spacebar. And you can see we're lifting off, but it's pretty slow at lift force 10. Let's really crank this up and see what happens. Let's make this 100, and let's make sure this is 15. And write all, apply all, and let's keep our fingers crossed. Let's hit spacebar. So there's our propeller is flipping, our object is moving. And we hit 15 and our helicopter is paused. All right, now if I press W, I can move forward. Pressing D, it's going to the right. Now that's super slow. So let's check our move speed and move it up to 100 because we want, even though our client may be too much. And the other thing is, as I rotate, the rotation is a little weird. So let's make our move speed maybe 30, and then our rotation speed, I want it to be, let's take that up to 100 because I want my rotation to be a little tighter. So if I hit spacebar to lift off, I'm rotating. You can see it rotates a little bit better, still not tight enough. So let's maybe make our rotation 300. So now when we're moving, you can see, yeah, it moves a little bit more like a helicopter, which is cool. And I still think it's a little too slow. We'll do 50 and 300. I'll let you play with, let's save that. Let's overwrite that. And I'll let you play with yours. But now we've created a really cool helicopter with some movement. And, you've got some trigger experience. So maybe you can have the helicopter not go through these mountains in the background. But for now, we're going to stop this video on movement, and then in the next section or video, we'll take a look at maybe creating a drop box or our food crates that we drop off. All right, so let's take a look at creating a place, like a little object on the bottom of our copter. And this is going to be a place where we can left click and drop food packages for those who need it. So I'm going to right click in here and I'm going to go create empty and I'm going to name this drop point. And this drop point is an empty game object, which means it really doesn't have, it's not visible, but we're going to use its current position. We'll just put this on the copter and we'll reset that. We're going to use its current position to indicate where the packages will drop from. So let's say we have it drop from the bottom here. Actually, it might be kind of cool, like it looks like we're sort of sending the packages off the side. So we'll do something like this. And we have to be conscious, though, of the collision of the object and the scale of it. So there's our drop point. And then let's go ahead and do override apply all here. And then let's make the object that it's going to drop. Now, we could, in ProBuilder, model a really beautiful crate. For now, I'm just going to use a 3D object in a cube. And we'll make it a little bit bigger, so something like this. And let's look at that drop point's position. So that's pretty out there. Let's move that drop point a little bit closer to the side here. And let's move that cube just next to it so we can see its position. Yeah, so that's not too bad. And we kind of want to make it a little bit bigger just because of visibility. And actually, for our main camera, I'm going to just drop that below our copter and then reset its position. And then I'm just going to pull this out a little bit like this. And let's drag it off. And I'm just going to set, let's see, I'm going to copy my numbers here. It's going to be -90, just so we're looking at it. And we are going to write a script in one of the lessons, a camera movement script that's going to follow this character, this helicopter around. But for now, we just need it for visibility. Okay, so there is our cube, which we're going to name it food box. All right, there's our food box, and I'd like to make this a prefab, so let's drag this into our prefabs folder. And let's see. And let's go ahead and create a script that's going to control when we left click, it sends our food over the off the side. All right, so on the scripts folder, I'm going to right click, I'm going to go to create and then C# script. Now let's name this drop object. And the reason why I'm not naming it drop food or whatever is because if you ever want to use this script again, you can use it for dropping other objects. So I'm going to double click this and go ahead and open this script in Visual Studio. All right, so we need a reference to, first of all, the spawn point, which is the point in which we're going to send the food over. So we created that before. And the next thing we need to do is we need to create another game object that's going to store whatever object we want to drop. Oops. There we go. Now, this object to drop is going to have a rigid body on it, and that's what's going to, and we're going to check on use gravity. And what I'd like to do is add a little bit of force to make it look like it's kind of flying off the side. So let me actually save this. And let's add a variable that's really just going to, we're going to multiply to add enough force. So you can see here that it's just a regular float variable, and it says drop force equals 10. So we'll save that. Now let's attach this to our copter and populate the object to drop and then the spawn point. And so here we are back in Unity. I'm going to select my copter And let's just minimize this for a second. And I'm going to drag my drop object script and drop it on here. Now for the spawn point, we made that earlier with the drop point here. And then the object to drop is going to be this food box. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my food box from down here and then drop it in here. The reason for that is because eventually I'm going to delete this food box out. And I really just leave it here as a placeholder. And so for this food box here, you can see that I can go in here and add component rigid body. And then that looks pretty good. But if I go up to my food box here, you can see that it updated it as well. So even though I added it here, it automatically updates it. And I don't need to do the override apply all. See, it says no overrides because when you edit it in here, it's a little different than editing it there. So we have a rigid body there, and we want to use gravity. So if I press play now, you'll see this flies out. Now I'm okay with it like if we eventually like delete this and we add water underneath it or something. I'm okay with not having too much collision on the terrain. All right, so there's that food box. And let's save our scene here. And let's return to Unity and take a look at how we can script it, with Visual Studio rather, where I left click and it comes off the side. All right, so in our update function, let's go ahead and type out an if statement. All right, now this if statement is just checking. This is input, get bounce button down, 0. Now inside of here, what I'd like to do is, if you recall from before, whether our space tutorial or whatever, we have this instantiation here. And I don't want to instantiate the spawn point. What I'd like to do is I'd like to instantiate out the object to drop, and the position in which I'm going to drop it is the spawn point. So let's go ahead. I'm going to alter this line here. All right, so what I have here is I have a game object, and if I left click now, it's going to not only instantiate this object, but it's going to store a reference to whatever object it's going to store a reference to whatever object comes out. So that's going to be our crate. So let me save this and show you. Let's jump back into Unity, and then we'll add another line of code that's going to actually add some drop force to the object. So let me press play here, and if I left click in here, you can see that the objects jump out. They come out of the, and we could set up an if statement that says like they delay it from creating these boxes. You can see I'm left clicking and we're creating a bunch of these boxes. If I hit spacebar, my copter goes in the air, and as I'm moving around, I could drop these boxes all over the place. We should also have it where they destroy, because memory will start to, it'll get a little memory intensive if we have thousands of these crates. But let's return to Visual Studio. You could literally stop here in respect to having the crates come out, but let me show you the code inside of Visual Studio, which will add a little force to make it shoot off the side. All right, so below this line, I'm going to use this dropped object variable here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get that rigid body component that's attached to that crate, and I'm going to add force to it. And what I'm going to do is, as it's going down, I'm going to multiply it by drop force. Now, impulse is a little interesting because it uses the actual force, but it adds it as like an impulse in sections, like a little burst. And let me save this. And again, you could have stopped here. You could actually delete this and just do instantiate object. But I like to give it a little bit more, so it's going to shoot off the side. And we might have to adjust this drop force, which is fine because we added a serialized field to make this public. All right, let's save this. And you might want to pause the video at this point and sort of type all this out. All right, here we are. So now when I press play, let's see what happens. I left click, you can see it adds a little bit of force there. We might have to add a little more force. So let's see how that works. Let's see, here's our copter. And we have drop force. Let's say we had 50 here. And we left click, you can see it adds a little bit more acceleration. So, I mean, again, it's sort of, and you can also do to the side. So let's take off, have our helicopter go a little higher than that. It's a kind of a sad helicopter. So let's say our maximum altitude is 30, and we want the lift force to be 200. So it goes a little bit quicker. So let's hit play and hit spacebar here. Goes up a little bit higher. Now we can sort of move around, drop these crates all over the place. So the last thing we can do actually is maybe we'll add, just make a script that just controls the crate, and that really just has the destroy object on it. We could get a reference to that crate and do it through the script. But really, if the crate is it's an object within itself and it has its own properties, like say we want it to explode or whatever, we really should have a script called crate. So I'm going to right click in here and just really quickly create a C# script called crate. And then I'm going to go ahead and double click this and open it in Visual Studio. All right, so this is a very simple script. We're inside of this crate. We could have also named it food box because that's what we have. And all I did is I wrote destroy this, referring to whatever this object is that's attached to the script, .GameObject, and we could have it delete after 3 seconds because I thought it'd be cool to be there a little longer. And really, we don't need this update function for now. Generally, I leave it in there though because I always use it for testing. So let's go ahead and attach this to our crate prefab, or our food box prefab rather. All right, so here's our food box. Let's go and with the food box selected there, we'll drag our crate script. Now, as I mentioned before, because our copter is referencing this food box, if I select the one in the scene and I delete it, we don't necessarily need it, right? Because we have a reference to this prefab that's in here. It's not in our scene. Another powerful feature of having prefabs. So if I press play here, I hit spacebar, we have a liftoff, and I left click and I drag and drop a billion of these things in the scene. After 3 seconds, they start to delete. So it's pretty cool. All right. What we'll do in the next video, or the next lesson rather, depending on how you're viewing this, we'll create a main camera script that'll follow our helicopter around